In the last few lectures, we've been looking at the varieties of ad hominem argument. And in particular, we've looked at a bunch of examples of ad hominem fallacies and the different kinds of ad hominem fallacies. Today, I want to start on a new but related topic. The new topic is appeals to authority. So, first let me define appeals to authority and make it clear precisely how appeals to authority are related to ad hominem arguments. So first, what's an appeal to authority? So an appeal to authority is a kind of argument that begins with premises about a particular person who's making a claim and ends with a conclusion that endorses that person's claim. In a way, you could think of an appeal to authority as the opposite of an ad hominem argument, right? Remember, an ad hominem argument is one that starts with premises about a particular person who's making a claim and then ends with a conclusion that is opposed to that person's claim. In an appeal to authority, you start with the same sorts of premises, but you end with a conclusion that is in favor of that person's claim. Okay, so here's an example of an appeal to authority. It's a particularly egregious example, not one that anyone would be consciously guilty of making, but still an example to give us the rough idea. So, premise one, Takahashi has just given an eloquent presentation of evidence that normalizing U.S. relations with Cuba will result in benefit to both nations. Premise two, Takahashi's presentation was extremely eloquent, and she was very well dressed. Conclusion: we should accept Takahashi's conclusion to the effect that normalizing relations between the United States and Cuba will result in benefit to both countries. Okay, so that's an example of an appeal to authority. It's an argument that begins with premises about a particular person, in this case premises about how eloquent Takahashi was and how well dressed she was. Right? So we start off with premises like that and we end with a conclusion, so we should believe her. We should accept her conclusion because after all, she was so well dressed and eloquent. Okay, now as I said, that's a very egregious example of an appeal to authority. But appeals to authority all have that structure. They start with premises about a particular person, and they end with a conclusion to the effect that what that person said is especially credible, should get special weight. Okay, so appeals to authority, like ad hominem arguments, come in three kinds, corresponding to the three jobs that someone is doing whenever they give an argument or whenever they try to prove a point. Remember, the three things that someone is doing whenever they give an argument or try to prove a point are these. First, they're implying that they are entitled to put forth claims about the issue. Right? If I'm putting forth claims about an issue, then my behavior implies that I'm entitled to do so. Second, the person who's putting forth claims about an issue, is making an argument about an issue, is implying that the premises that they're giving actually do support the conclusion that they're drawing. Right? I wouldn't be giving certain premises in support of my conclusion unless I believed that those premises really did support that conclusion. So, for me to give certain premises in support of a conclusion is to imply that those premises really do support that conclusion. I might not be saying that the premises support that conclusion, but my behavior clearly implies that I think so. Okay, finally, of course, when you give an argument in favor of a certain conclusion, you're claiming that the conclusion is true. That's part of the point of arguing for a conclusion. You're trying to prove the conclusion, establish it, claim that it's true. Okay, well, corresponding to these three things that people do when they give arguments, there are three different kinds of appeals to authority that we can make. Right? We can make a kind of appeal to authority that I call an amplifier. An amplifier is an argument that begins with premises about a particular person who's making a point and ends with a conclusion to the effect that we should place great weight or place great credence on the point that the person is making, right? That person is somehow especially entitled to speak on the issue, that they have some special authority that makes their argument deserving of our attention. That's an amplifier. Or we could give an appeal to authority argument that I call a supporter. A supporter is an argument that begins with premises about a particular person who's making a point and ends with a conclusion to the effect that the reasons that the person is giving in support of their point are especially compelling reasons. And finally, there's a kind of appeal to authority that I call an affirmer. When you give an affirmer, you're giving an argument that begins with premises about a particular person who's making a point, and you end with a conclusion that affirms the point that person is making, a conclusion that supports that person's conclusion, insists that that person's conclusion is true, or at least very probably true. Okay, so these are three different kinds of appeals to authority, and again, they correspond, just as the three different kinds of ad hominem argument corresponded to the three different things that someone is doing when they give an argument, right? The three different kinds of ad hominem argument were three different ways of arguing that the person who was making a point hadn't successfully executed one of these three jobs. The three different kinds of appeals to authority are three different ways of arguing that a particular person who's making an argument has successfully executed one or another of these three different jobs. Okay, so those are the three kinds of appeals to authority. In the next lecture, we'll talk about amplifiers. We'll give some examples of amplifiers that are good arguments, and then some examples of amplifiers which, occurring more routinely, are bad arguments. Okay, see you next time.